Last year, the legislature passed a bill lowering our income tax by 0.5 percentage point, which Beshear begrudgingly signed. I'm saying begrudgingly, because take a look at this video here.
Now, the best way to provide that relief would have been a reduction in the sales tax. A reduction in the sales tax for a certain period of time would have meant things that cost too much cost less. But the General Assembly refused to go that route. So what I'm faced with is a bill that would lower the income tax that has some long-term repercussions for potentially funding state services. But, and again, while there are some long-term repercussions, I have one bill in front of me, one bill about whether or not we can help our people at this time of high inflation. So today, I'm going to sign House Bill 1.
Now, did that sound like a governor who really wanted to sign that? Did that sound like somebody who actually supported that bill? And keep in mind, he vetoed it. So he vetoes the first bill, and then he begrudgingly signs the next bill. But now the economy's doing great. Is it in part because of these types of legislation? Probably. But he can't not take credit for it. He needs to claim these tax cuts, the same tax cuts that he vetoed. The same tax cuts that we just heard him begrudgingly sign, he has got to take credit for it. And welcome, everybody, to another amazing episode of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider, and you will notice we're in a drastically different situation than last podcast if you're watching this in the video format. I have left the home office. Instead, we have an actual studio room built out in one of my extra offices I had at one of my companies. And here I am broadcasting to you from there. Additionally, as well, moving forward, starting next week, we're going to be pumping this podcast out daily. All this time and effort certainly means we need your support. So please like, comment, share, subscribe. Thousands of people have been listening to this podcast every single week. And a few weeks ago, we used to do it daily for like a week just to test it out. Thousands of you still tuned in. So please like, comment, share, subscribe. And if you're interested in advertising on this podcast, please visit the andrewshow.com. That's the andrewshow.com. And up at the top in the menu bar, just click on advertisers and you'll see what advertisement packages we have to offer to you. Because starting next week, in order to pay for the equipment and the time and the effort we put into this, we hope that you would support it with your ad dollars. It's a unique way to reach thousands of Kentuckians that fit into a very specific demographic of country-loving, God-fearing, conservative Kentuckians that you can reach with your ad dollars. So we'd appreciate it if you check that out. Reach out to us if you like anything there. And also as well, if you just want to reach out to the show, we've got a contact form on there. But please, if you're just listening, you're not interested in advertising or anything else, but you're just listening, you want to support what we're doing, share, like, comment, subscribe, and let's dig into it. We've got a great show planned out for us. Of course, we unfortunately have a judge's ruling on SB 150, the bill there to deal with some of the transgender issues happening in the state and granted across the country. We'll talk about that judge's ruling, what part of it he went after, and what do I think that has for us in the future. 93rd House District, both Democrats and Republicans have picked their candidates for that special election happening in November. And while the outcome may have surprised those in the media, it didn't surprise me of who the Democrats ended up going with. Beshear touts an accomplishment that he actually vetoed and was drastically against. We'll dig into that. And then finally, we'll be ending with some people's favorite segment, how I upset the left this week. Because you know I've got to upset them every day. I post something, they get real upset and real angry. And I know you all see it. I see it too. So let's dig into it. Judge ruling on SB 150. So we've got a judge, a constitutionality claim was made. Now, we've been seeing these constitutionality claims against these types of bills outlawing parts of this transgender treatment, targeting, of course, the minor side of things, saying, look, you know, you're 12, you're 13 years old, you shouldn't be able to permanently destroy the rest of your life on medication treatments that there's no way it's properly studied. But of course, what we're seeing is claims being made that somehow this is unconstitutional. And we're seeing these claims, and they're reading, and what we're seeing from these judges is a fewfold. One, you got to understand how expert testimony works in courts. So if you're trying to figure out how they're arriving at these conclusions, well, there is a certain degree of quote-unquote expert testimony. And understand this, you can get experts to say anything you want to. We saw this during the pandemic. How often were our experts wrong? I mean, take a look around and just view it. You couldn't talk about the lab leak theory. You'd be banned. That's craziness. The experts say it's not true. Well, now the experts are saying it is true. And you can take a look at things like the shot there and what happened with that, and how all the experts made all these claims that turned out to not be true. We saw it with masks, all the claims made that turned out to not be true, and so on and so forth. And we constantly have seen this over the last several years in our face, but we see this historically. The science, the experts, it's ever changing. And it's very bold for anybody to claim that they somehow have it. This is a settled matter. Now, what is the actual argument? And this is where I think that if and when these cases make it to the Supreme Court, they're immediately, these types of rulings we've been seeing will be overturned, because they are making the same decisions as they did like on Roe v. Wade. They're reading in rights into the Constitution that somehow the states don't have a right to regulate these kinds of things. And the federal government has a responsibility to step in because it's constitutionally protected. There is nowhere in our Constitution that gives you a right to gender change surgery. There is nowhere. Just like there's nowhere in our Constitution that gives you a right to things like plastic surgery that isn't life-saving. There is nowhere in our Constitution that actually gives you the right. It is up to the states to regulate those things. That is what they found with Roe. That was the wrong decision that was made 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever. With Roe, was that they read in rights into the Constitution that historically did not exist, that our founders and that wrote the amendments they're leaning on in no way, shape, or form would have meant it to believe that. And you can't read new rights into it. These are not originalist judges. These are individuals that are being activists from the bench, and they're listening to the experts that they're pulling forward. If you notice, when you start looking at a lot of the cases from the pandemic, when we started winning those cases was when we started having experts coming forward that had the background. And I'm thinking about here in Kentucky, we had a industrial hygienist, very well decorated, nationally recognized, that made testimony on masks and their efficacy and how they should be approached. And it was that expert's testimony versus an epidemiologist's testimony that ended up in resulting in a judge actually ruling that wearing a mask to affect the pandemic there was equivalent to putting up a chain link fence to stop mosquitoes. But that was pretty late into it. But it was once we could find an expert. Or take, for an example, like Dr. Molly Rutherford, an expert, has her master's in epidemiology, has her doctorate, her medical PhD, general practitioner, but used to work at NIH, was the direct assistant of Fauci. And when she started testifying in court saying, look, the way they're approaching this is all wrong, it goes against everything, that's when cases started to get overturned, because there was experts willing to speak out. And the problem also becomes, you become an expert willing to speak out, they will, the fear of them taking away your license. Look at what's going on in Canada right now with Jordan Peterson. He is saying things they don't like, and you can agree with him, disagree with him, whatever. But I can tell you this much. He's saying things they don't like, and so they want to remove his license for it. And that is a real fear that they have, because these boards, these medical boards, have been infiltrated, and the fear is you talk out about it, you may get your license taken away. And it's not until people get pushed far enough where they say, look, there's a problem. So what did the judge say? The judge said on SB 150 that he believed, these several judges have said this, that hormone blockers are necessary. That's right. We have reached a point where we have thrown all common sense out the window. We've reached a point where we believe we can pause puberty and nothing bad will happen. Never mind the fact that these puberty blockers have been forced to add a warning that this may cause infertility. That's right. Let's give them a medication, but this may cause infertility. But also, too, going into that, just think about the mental gap and leap we have made here, where we sit here and say this with a straight face, that you believing you were born in the wrong body is perfectly healthy. No other mental illness that involves the belief that you were born in the wrong body do we entertain in such this way. Bulimia, anorexia, body dysmorphia like that, to name a few. Wanting to cut yourself, things like that, that all involve with hating your body. We do not believe that's okay. But yet, for some reason, not only do we believe that's okay, we're giving young children hormone blockers, and now we have judges trying to say that this is some sort of right. Now, understand this. Judges did not overturn the blocking of gender reassignment surgeries for under 18, but they did puberty blockers because of a belief that if they don't get this, these kids will kill themselves. Where is that data coming from? Where are these experts coming from? They are talking out of their butts. We know that. And all it takes is some experts that are allowed in court, that are properly prepared and trained for those types of things, that know what they're claiming and is aware of it. But when your first time we're having these cases and these trials, the experts on the other sides aren't there because we're not prepared to know what they're going to say. So not only do I foresee that these types of rulings, these rulings that we've been seeing all over the country, will be overturned like this one here in Kentucky, but I do believe, too, the Supreme Court, they won't care what the expert testimony is. It doesn't matter what the expert testimony is. Not only that, the data doesn't play it out. Please tell us where we have seen lower suicide rates since we started prescribing hormone blockers. No, instead we see gigantic, skyrocketing suicide rates. Our decisions that we're making right now, this crazy ideologies are literally killing our kids. We have skyrocketing suicide rates, and instead of taking a look at what we're doing and say, hey, maybe we're doing this wrong, instead, we've decided more cowbell. We've decided to march forward with these crazy ideas that are killing a generation and warping their minds. This isn't healthy and it's not safe. Mental health issues as a whole in this country are declining. Quality of life is declining. Suicide rates are inclining. The amount of people on medication for mental issues, increasing, going up. We're not doing something right, and it needs to change, and we've got to stop messing around with it. So not only do I look forward to this being overturned, but I look forward to our legislature here in the state getting back into session and go ahead and pushing forward some more bills to address these types of crazy ideas that not only are corrupting children, but are destroying a generation. It's not time to mess around with it. All right, 93rd District Special Election. Speaking of transgender people. So, as you may remember from a few episodes ago, the 93rd District here in Lexington, formerly held by Swain, who passed away after only one session, will now be up for a special election against Kyle Whalen, who Kyle Whalen ran against Swain when this seat. So this seat was first created within Lexington during the 2022 election. It was when it was first run. So there was the 93rd District used to be out in eastern Kentucky. There was such a big population shift over the last 10 years that eastern Kentucky lost one of their seats. And it got, well, they lost more than one, but they lost a seat. 93rd District got moved completely across the map into Kentucky, into Lexington, got moved across the map into Lexington from eastern Kentucky, and was up for election as a newly created seat for the first time in 2022. Swain wins against Kyle Whalen by about 7-8 points. But then he passes away, unfortunately, after one session. And now it's up for special election. Kyle Whalen has stepped back in. It is a special election. Weird things can happen during a special election, especially when you have somebody who just ran and was only 7 points off, which I know that sounds like a lot to a lot of people. But at the end of the day, remember, that's only 3.5% changing their vote, because losing one vote out of one category, transferring it to another. So you only need to flip 3.5% of the voters to now vote for Kyle Whalen. And the question is do people have any kind of voter regret? Do they even pay attention enough to have voter regret about not voting for Kyle before? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if there's 3.5% out there. But on the other side, there was quite the story and hubbub leading up to this special election process, because it looked like the Democrats may go with the first possible transgender state House rep. There's a transgender individual, a person, if I remember properly, is in a band. And that's all I know about. It's a guy that has turned into a woman face type action going on. And so this individual is, I believe, just in a band, young, I believe like 26, 27, not very old. I don't know what other quite experience outside of that. I don't believe has really managed a business or anything else. Could be mistaken. But the point is this individual who the media was making big hubbub about, because there's the first chance here at a transgender state House rep, and it was a good possibility the Democrats would elect this individual. But that's not what happened. What instead happened is an individual by the name of Ariella. I'm sorry if I'm getting this name wrong. I've never heard it said out loud. Ariella Camule. So it's Arielle, last name Camuel. It's been around the Democrat Party for quite some time based upon the article. But understanding how these special election operations take place, this is a vote that takes place with just the executive committee of the parties that the district represents. So the Republican Party of Fayette County, because the 93rd district is only in Fayette County. So the Republican Party of Fayette County, and then also the Democrat Party of Fayette County met, just their executive committee, which in the Fayette County is about 50 people. And then they cast a vote for who they want to be the representative in the election, and then whoever wins that. Now, why do I believe they didn't go with the transgender person? This will go into what I was talking about before, and it also goes into the hubbub. Quite frankly, Beshear doesn't want any attention on anything else but his election there in November. He wants nobody else getting any attention, and he definitely doesn't want these transgender issues to be at the forefront. I know this, you know this, he knows this. Everybody can hoot and holler and scream all they want to and pretend like everybody's on board with trans and the kids and everybody being transgender and doing drag shows in front of the kids and all these other things, but they're not. In fact, as I've mentioned before, polling data says 75% of Democrats are against children being at drag shows. 75% of Democrats. And they didn't want to see this type of issue, because remember, this individual that was running, and why that's even pertinent, is the individual who would have been chosen, this transgender person who could have been chosen, testified against bills banning children from watching drag shows, testified against them and protested them. And so it's not exactly like they are not on the record for having been for these types of things that Democrats don't agree with. So would it distracted away from Beshear? He would have had to been doing events with this transgender person running for office. He didn't want to do that. And I am sure he stepped in to say, look, this can't happen. We need the attention on me. Elect some vanilla-flavored person, some individual who's not that offensive. And so that way, one, the attention stays on me, and two, I'm not out there having to fight back and battle against this whole entire transgender issues coming up. Because already, several newspapers had wrote articles about this transgender 26-year-old running for office. It had already distracted away from Beshear's activities. And he wasn't going to continue to allow that to happen. He wasn't going to continue to allow this type of issue to drag him down. He's not that type of person. And all you LGBTQIA plus divided by sign 2368 people, if you somehow have made it this far into the podcast, and you're still listening, take this as a sign. Democrats don't care about you. They just use you in order to get your votes. But when it comes down to it, they're not going to give up their power for you. Stop acting like they will. And stop lying to yourself. Stop trying to throw parades for yourself. Stop trying to dedicate days to yourself. You're hurting your cause more than helping it because you're pushing everybody too far. So much so that the Democrat Party won't even allow transgender people to represent them when they get to make the single decision because they don't want that to be the issue. That's on you. You've made it an issue. Back it down. Nobody cares about what you do in your private time. All we care about is the children, exposing yourself to children, getting children to do irreversible whatever, and being naked in public. That's all we care about. We don't care. If you want to go do a drag show, whatever, in a bar, you want to walk around in non-revealing women's clothing and just whatever, we'll judge you for it, sure, quietly in our minds, but I'm not going to ask my government to do anything about it. I'm not going to ask them to lock you up. But instead, you decide to push it too far. And now you're seeing it blow up in your face where even Democrats won't elect a transgender person. Speaking of Beshear and his craziness, two-facedness, Beshear touts the thing he vetoes in recent tweet here. So to read the tweet for you, Beshear tweeted out this year, "I'm proud to be the governor who has lowered both income and property taxes for Kentucky families. And I'm going to keep working to ensure that more money stays in the pockets of our people." He says he's proud to be the governor that has lowered both income and property taxes. Well, unfortunately for Beshear, there's something called a veto message that we remember. Now, for those of you who aren't aware how our income taxes have come down, this all goes back to 2022. There was House Bill 8 that set up this framework for how to lower our income taxes and switching over to a more consumption-based tax. When House Bill 8 first passed, setting up the opportunity for these tax cuts to take place, these tax cuts he is now taking credit for, Beshear had this to say. "I, Andy Beshear, Governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, pursuant to the authority granted under Section 88 of the Kentucky Constitution, do hereby veto the following. House Bill 8 of the 2022 regular session of the General Assembly in its entirety. I am vetoing House Bill 8 because it imposes new taxes that weaken public safety, harm vital industries, undermine economic development incentives, and threaten Kentucky's future economic security." That's what he said. He said House Bill 8 also takes aim at Kentucky's vital tourism industry by imposing new taxes on conferences and events, making Kentucky's less competitive. House Bill 8 also imposes new taxes on hybrid and electric vehicles at a time when Kentucky is poised to become a leader in manufacturing those vehicles and batteries. He continues. House Bill 8 also violates the Kentucky Constitution because it provides special treatment to public service companies. So he believes it is unconstitutional. He believes that he doesn't like it. He believes it's harming our future, lest you not believe that. Here we got, finally, this is at the end, finally, House Bill 8 threatens Kentucky's economic future. Other states have drastically cut income tax, have seen their economies harmed by those changes. The then governor of Kansas promised that similar tax cuts passed in 2012 would be a shot of adrenaline to the heart of the Kansas economy. The opposite was true. 5 years later, Kansas had to roll back those tax cuts when its economy performed worse than the national average and the state could not provide essential public services. The General Assembly should learn from Kansas's mistakes. Instead, House Bill 8 repeats him. For those reasons, I am vetoing House Bill 8. That is Beshear's own words. Now, how does he claim he somehow has passed this? Well, let's fast forward into last year. So what this bill did, and we can go into whether or not we supported the bill at a different time, because what's more important is talking about what the bill did. What this bill did is it created a framework for stepping down the income tax. So the income tax would go down by 0.5% a year as long as we hit certain markers of revenue into the state general fund. Well, we hit that marker, and last year the legislature passed a bill lowering our income tax by 0.5 percentage point, which Beshear begrudgingly signed. I'm saying begrudgingly because take a look at this video here.
Hey everybody, it's Andy. I want to talk to you today about my decision on House Bill 1, which should lower the income tax in Kentucky. First, things are tough out there. Inflation is real, and while gas prices have come down, the grocery store bill is still way too high. While this issue is temporary, it's still going to last for some time into the foreseeable future, and our people need relief. Now, the best way to provide that relief would have been a reduction in the sales tax. A reduction in the sales tax for a certain period of time would have meant things that cost too much cost less. But the General Assembly refused to go that route. So what I'm faced with is a bill that would lower the income tax that has some long-term repercussions for potentially funding state services, but would put at least a couple $100 in the pockets of most Kentuckians at a time when they need it. What we just got was our revenue from January. And what I can tell you is our economy remains on fire. We had the best January in our history and the best January even for income tax, despite the fact it just went down. So right now, our economy can certainly sustain not just the decrease in the income tax that has already happened, but another one as well. And again, while there are some long-term repercussions, I have one bill in front of me, one bill about whether or not we can help our people at this time of high inflation. So today, I'm going to sign House Bill 1. That's going to lower the income tax on Kentuckians. And I hope as we get through this period where, again, groceries cost too much, that this helps everybody out there at least a little bit.
So that was his veto message for that lowering after he vetoed, or not his veto message, sorry, that was his signing message. After, I read to you before that, his veto message on House Bill 8. There you go. You listen to his signing message. Now, did that sound like a governor who really, really, really wanted to sign that? Did that sound like somebody who actually supported that bill? And keep in mind, he vetoed it. So he vetoes the first bill, and then he begrudgingly signs the next bill. But now the economy's doing great. Is it in part because of these types of legislation? Probably. But he can't not take credit for it. He needs to claim these tax cuts, the same tax cuts that he vetoed, the same tax cuts that we just heard him begrudgingly sign. He has got to take credit for it. So he tweets out that tweet, taking credit. This is the kind of hypocritical, two-faced BS we can expect from Andy Beshear. He's been like this all along. I care about the small business owner. Well, he shuts us down. I care about you as I take away your freedoms. I'm a Christian, as he shuts down churches and then stands with people like the Perpetual Sisters of Indulgence, who are literally a group built to make fun of Christianity and castigate it and throw it in Christians' faces that they exist. And he stands with them. That is who he associates with. But yet, he wants you to believe that, because that is Andy. Two-faced Beshear. That's who he is. When he will say and do whatever he thinks he needs to do to remain in power, and he will go back on his own words. We just heard that there. Now, finally, final segment. I know you all love it. What I did to upset the left this week. Well, I posted this, a image, the classic Facebook image of the flag, Mark Safe, the little Mark Safe flag. It says, Mark Safe from paying someone else's college debt. And ooh boy, were they hopping mad. They were very upset. Why were they so upset? Well, because they think, according to their comments here, that college should be a human right. They think that we need an educated society, and we should all pay for that. And on top of that, these individuals who went to college, that probably have college debt and are complaining about it, don't understand basic ideas. See, the first thing they said is, well, the taxpayer wouldn't be paying for anything. We just wouldn't be collecting money. Do they take that approach when it comes to these so-called rich people that aren't paying their fair share? Well, they're not really taking from us. They're just not paying something. No, of course not. But this was a common talking point. We're just choosing not to collect money. We don't have to pay out money. We already backed the loan. Not only has loan providers been able to make money off of providing the loan that we then back as a federal government, but the colleges got their check for it already. Who do you think that money comes from? Oh, it doesn't cost us anything. We're just forgiving the loan. Yes, it does. We have to make up that revenue elsewhere. It is on our balance sheets for the state. I don't comprehend what they don't understand here. But those payments in are to pay off a loan that then the taxpayer, you and I, have backed for them against our will, mind you, but have backed for them, and now they don't want to pay it. And, we'll take a deeper dive probably next week or so into the college debt fiasco, how this all got started and how it's such a scam. But besides that, these individuals, they don't understand basic economic. They don't understand basic money principles. The money left our accounts. We're holding it as a liability. And if the revenues don't come in to pay off the liability, we have to pay off the liability somewhere else. That money enters an account and isn't just... It's used. You think what? We just sit on that hoard of money? You know we don't. You're just saying stupid things because you don't like the fact that you had to pay a lot for college. And instead of demanding the types of reforms like getting government out of college loans, nobody's asking why is it our government has the ability to forgive, has even a thought to forgive college loans. It's because they're the ones backing it. And let's not go into the fact that college's skyrocketing price is due to that, something we can dig into next week. But it's an unfortunate fact that the money was paid out and asking the taxpayer to pay for it, ridiculous. On top of that, those of you who finish your degree that owe money, having the taxpayer pay that off for you, you're having probably some of the poorest amongst us, not the poorest amongst us, but having those who don't have college degrees pay for your decisions. And then those who paid off their college degrees paying for your decisions. You shouldn't have gone to college. I get it. You're pushed into it. You're sold a bucket of lies. Maybe you didn't finish your degree because you took some bad advice. Or maybe you got a degree in something stupid that you shouldn't have. Or maybe that degree isn't worth what you thought it was. Because in a modern day where any piece of information you could want, you can get at your fingertips, having a piece of paper that says you sat in a classroom isn't worth as much as it used to be. And I get it. It sucks. But at the same time, don't be asking Joe Schmo down the street to make up and pay for your decision. The government doesn't create anything. Where'd that money come from, did you think? It come from our pockets. But of course, it's a hard thing for any individual to understand. Anything to justify. Anything in a Democrat's mind to justify a handout, especially if it's going to them. Well, guys, that's what we have time for this week. Thank you so much for joining us on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. As always, we'll be back here next week. Like I said, we'll be switching over to that daily show. As I said at the top, you want to advertise, you want to help support the show, you want to push forward your business to reach people like you, visit theandrewshow.com. theandrewshow.com and check out our advertisers page. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day.